Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Paris Dunning. I'm the director of the East Side Area Business Association. It is May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, if you celebrate. And we are talking about the Heights, the Hillcrest development renamed with our community and with members of the AAPI network this morning. So I want to thank our sponsors first, so I'll do a little share and we'll do that. And then we'll do a quick round of who's on this call. I've invited folks who jumped on to go ahead and put in the chat their name and contact, the organization that they're from, and one thing that they love about the East Side in spring. It is finally spring here in Minnesota, I know. We're saving the best for last here as usual in May. So, but it's May 5th and we're ready to rock. Here are our sponsors that we can thank today. AAPI loves staying connected with you, and these sponsors help us do it. Our annual sponsors are Ideal Printers, DV Creative, Harrington Langer and Associates, State Farm, the State Farm Office of Juan Cervantes, the Sane Foundation, M Health Fairview, St. Paul Federal Credit Union, the St. Paul Port Authority, Highway Credit Union, Sunrise Banks, Metro State University, Mueller Memorial, Premier Banks, Walter Recycling and Refuse, and Health Partners. So let's see. There we go. Now we're back. Let's see who's on this call. Let's start with AAPI board members. If so, go ahead and turn on your camera if you can. I think that's good. If you're willing, if you're able to be seen this morning. And let's do just a quick round of who do we see so far on the call. If you are an AAPI board member, go ahead and give us a wave. So I see Chelsea from Visit St. Paul and Tanya Bauer from the Port Authority. Who else is a board member that's on the call? I saw Shatika Flowers. Thank you, Shatika. Welcome to the party. Those are the board members that are here. If you run a small business on the East Side, go ahead and give us a gesture of some kind. Could be an imperious bow, could be just a general. We don't have any businesses on the call at the moment. Okay, well, that was that. If you are a part of a nonprofit on the East Side, go ahead. We're in a nonprofit that's a part of our community. Go ahead and give us a wave. Got some nonprofits out there. AAPI is a nonprofit. Robin at District 5. Ben over at the East Side Freedom Library. Shatika at Family Values for Life. Okay, that's good. All right. If you are a member of the public-private, Visit St. Paul. Did I do you, Chelsea?
We're not on the East Side. I know we struggle with this, but so yes, nonprofit representing the city.
That's great. Member of our network is the better way for me to say that, right? All right. Who else do we see today? We have got folks from the St. Paul Port Authority, the public-private. We can't figure out what to define it. Port Authority. We've got some great members from the port today. I see Lori Seaver, also from District 1, Tanya Bauer, Andrea Novak. Those are our port people.
And we also have Tiffany.
Oh, Tiffany, yes.
LHB, because if we have technical questions and Monty is out of town, I do not want to miss questions. So Tiffany is teed up and she can answer pretty much anything.
That's great. Tiffany will have some stumpers for you, hopefully, like some real wild. Let's see what we can do. And she didn't say about this project either. So we expect broad answers about just anything, Tiffany. That's
Bring it out. Let's talk. Yes.
We have some other folks on the call. We've got some members from the city as well. I see our city council members, Nelsie Yang and Jane Prince. Welcome. I also see Melanie McMahon is the Melanie. It's your first time on the call. Would you just click on and tell us who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful to see everybody. I'm Melanie McMahon. I'm the executive project lead for redevelopment in the city of St. Paul in the mayor's office. So great to see you all. A lot of familiar faces.
Thanks for being on. I didn't mention Crystal Hollins from before, from 180 Degrees. Crystal, great to see you. Let's see, we have Stephanie Haar from Councilmember Jane Prince's office, also an East Side resident. Hi, Steph. We have Tad Walker, who's from the Action Wheel Leadership Group, that's also working with our board. So good to see Tad. And we have, and then Jan Ledholm is the other person on our call. She's a resident of the East Side, and she has stepped away from her computer for the moment. Okay, so Jan will acknowledge that you are here in just a second when you come back. To start us off, I want to go ahead and drop our agenda in the chat. There's Jan. Hi, Jan. We just said hi to you. Sorry. All right. I think that's everyone. Is that those are the folks on the call that I think that's all the screens I can see. Here comes our agenda into the chat for everybody. We've done the first 2 items. Thanks for dropping some great things that you love about the East Side in here. I see a lot of good stuff. I'm just kind of scrolling through. A lot of walks that are happening. A lot of good things going on patios, for sure. Totally bicycling. I thought that was recycling for a second. Great things going on in the spring, and we will come back to that in just a second. But in a way, that helps us kick off the next thing that we want to do, which is welcome Chelsea Fye to talk for just a minute about Travel and Tourism Week. Another fantastic thing that happens in the spring, some of which happens on the East Side. Chelsea, give us the basics on Travel and Tourism Week.
Awesome. Thanks, Ferris, for giving me a few minutes to do a little shameless plug. My name is Chelsea, and I'm the Marketing and Partnership Director at Visit St. Paul. This week is National Travel and Tourism Week, so I just wanted to take a few minutes to, I think there's some confusion sometimes about like, what do we actually do? And so to tell you about our organization and our mission, and invite you to join in celebrating with us. So we are the only organization in the city dedicated to promoting St. Paul as a destination to travelers. Whether it's people looking to take a vacation, a leisure traveler coming here for a sporting event, or, and then we also have a sales group that works to bring in meetings and conventions from around the nation. Sometimes, for instance, the MLS All-Star Game is going to be here later this year. And I think there's the conception that these groups just show up here, they just come. And really it takes years of work from our team, and we work in partnership with Minneapolis and Bloomington on occasion to bring these really large events to the city, all with the goal of creating economic development here in the community. It's good for businesses, it's good for the residents, and just the community at large to bring travelers in to spend their money in St. Paul. So this week, as I said, we're celebrating National Travel and Tourism Week. This is a time where tourism professionals come together to celebrate this important work and acknowledge that how important it is for our communities. So we have an event Friday morning that I would like to invite anyone interested in attending. We have our member meeting. It's at Can Wonderland, and we'll be joined by the new executive director of Explore Minnesota, as well as hear about another exciting event that's coming to St. Paul this summer, the Latvian Song and Dance Festival. Will be here over the week of the 4th of July. They have events all around the city. They're open to the public, and it's going to bring thousands of people to the community. And another one that I remember hearing about this group when I started working at Visit St. Paul 4.5 years ago. So this has been a long group in the making, and they will be here this summer. So I'll share a link in the chat. If you want to come and join us, you're more than welcome. They're going to be breakfast pizzas and all sorts of fun stuff. I'll also share a code. There is a fee if you are not a member business of Visit St. Paul, but I will share a code so you can sign up and attend for free. And then also just one last little plug. If you have a need or a desire to connect with visitors to the city and you haven't engaged with Visit St. Paul before, I invite you to do that. I would love to talk to you. All right. Thanks, Ferris.
Thank you, Chelsea. Wonderful. We had a couple other members join while we were just getting started here. So I see Ruben Moore from the West Side Health, and I'm not saying it right. It's Community Health West Side. Ruben, come on, tell us who you are. If he's listening in. Hey,
Hello, everyone. I am Ruben Moore. I am the President and Executive Officer of Minnesota Community Care, which used to be Westside Community Health Services. We have an East Side Family Clinic and a number of other McDonald's Homes Clinic and another other sites in the East Side. And of course, we have about 20 sites across Ramsey and Dakota County. And we're just excited to be a part of this. I think the reimagination of the East Side has been so important for us. And we want to be able to support this Hillcrest development. We think it's an awesome opportunity to reinvigorate St. Paul. And we know it may not meet all the affordable housing standards. It may do all, but what a way to kind of reimagine a space that's been pretty dormant for a number of years. And so I'd love to learn more here today, and also to collaborate with any partners as well. And so I do as my side thing is I do community development from a social impact lens as well. So I'm always interested in learning more how I can participate in the local economy.
great. Thanks, Ruben. I see Dwayne Morris is also on as well. And we met him at our last coffee break. And I know that he's been working with you on a project too. Hi, Dwayne.
Hey, Paris, how are you doing?
Doing great. Good to see you. We're going to jump into our agenda here in a second. We just wanted to give you a shout out since I saw you come on.
Likewise, thank you.
And Tez, I think from Eads Cleaning as well. I saw you just a second ago, didn't I, Tez? Or was it Connor maybe? Click on if you're there. Oh,
Thank you, Raji. But yeah,
oh, hey, Raji, how are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
That's good. Hey, you know, when you and Tez are in the same room, I can tell you apart, but on a tiny little screen, sometimes I can't. How are you, man? It
No, it's
looks
all
like
good. No
looks
worries.
like you're out doing something. We're glad to have you on the call. Great to see you, Raji. And Andrea from Family
Yeah, I'm
Values.
actually at a Midtown Global Market right now in South Minneapolis.
Okay, sounds great. Glad to have you all on the call, and Andrea from Family Values as well. Andrea, at the end of the call, it'd be great to just get a sense of how the Mother's Day event went. But let's jump into our topic right now. You have a big heart. That's good for Mother's Day and the Mother's Day event. Let's jump into our topic right now and kind of get ourselves going with this. Thanks so much, Chelsea, for the intro to spring there. And any other chat comments folks want to make for great things to do in the spring on the East Side. That's where we started with our initial question. I'm going to pick up and drop questions in the chat to help kind of structure our conversation. And we'll start with some context for where we are in the process and what has been decided if the master plan is adopted and what's being shaped next. And I just want to turn it over to folks from, I think Andrea maybe is going to kick us off, or I'll turn it over to Andrea, and Andrea, you can kind of help coordinate for how we get started with this question.
Sure. And I guess I wonder if, as you're talking about the master plan, that is going through the city. And so what we do know is it has gone through the Planning Commission, and on May 25th, there's going to be a public meeting with City Council, but I don't know if maybe some of the people from the city want to provide some insight onto that as they're more involved on that side of it.
Or in terms of the process, or in terms of what's in the plan, or both?
Both the master plan, and I mean, we're excited to see it getting close to approval, but we're not a part of the approval process.
Yeah, we can totally hear from the city on that. Just to kind of foreground while city figures out who wants to talk about it. I don't know if that's Melanie who wants to talk about it, or Councilmember Prince or Councilmember Yang. But we've been through a process, haven't we, so far? And it'd be great to just hear a little description of how that process has unfolded and how long it's taken, and kind of what we're coming up to, the milestone we're coming up to.
Sure, I'm happy to just maybe a few words, but then kick it off over to Councilmember Yang, really for her ward and the project in there, and let her have an opportunity to really fill in a lot of the details, because she's done a lot of significant work really over the past few years in involving community throughout the process. So that's been wonderful, and that has been great to see. The just sort of the date to throw out, I guess, to let folks know about is that May 25th date, that the master plan will be before the council for a public hearing. And so that's really yet another opportunity for folks to send comments, make phone calls, let everyone on the council and the city kind of know your thoughts as you're reviewing it and going through and checking it out. But I will, like I said, turn it over to Councilmember Yang, put you on the spot maybe just because I know the Planning and Economic Development Department has done a lot of community outreach, but really worked with you, and you did sort of an extraordinary amount of additional community outreach to make sure that throughout the neighborhood that folks really had a voice in that process. So I'll let you talk a little more about that.
Thanks, everyone. I think it would have been good for us to pull in somebody from our Planning and Economic Development Department to talk a bit more about this, but I do have a briefing scheduled with them pretty soon, just so that they can summarize all of the discussions that have happened during the Planning Commission. For me, it's really important for this to be authentic and have it be community led. And so a lot of the points made during the Planning Commissions, the hearings, is something that will be coming to me pretty soon here. So I hope that we will have a future meeting where we can invite our staff to have a more detailed conversation about it. But again, the Planning Commission, so far, what I've heard is that they've unanimously recommended an approval with 8 minor changes that have since been incorporated into their documents. And so they basically have been taking input from the community about the Hillcrest plans and really talking about rezoning, about zoning code amendments right now, about the comprehensive plan. And it'll be coming to us, the council, for a final vote pretty soon here. So a lot of that I'm still waiting to hear on, but overall, it sounds like there have been a lot of support for the work being done so far on Hillcrest, which I'm very pleased about. And I do know that, basically keeping to our timeline is super crucial because, as you all know, we are looking for state bonding to get Hillcrest cleaned up. And so any delays could really put our project here at stake. And I know a lot of legislators have been really asking about our timeline. They're wondering, well, when's the vote going to happen within the city council? And are you all going to stick to your timeline? So they're really nailing us on that. I wanted to stress on that because I know we've been hearing from folks about whether we should give it more time to collect input, or whether we're going to keep to the timeline. And so I feel it's really important for us to do as much as we can in the moment right now to keep to our timeline, make sure that we do secure funding to get Hillcrest cleaned up and stay on track as much as possible and get this project to be shovel ready. And so I love to come back and talk to you some more about specifics that was discussed within the Planning Commission right now. I just haven't had that briefing yet with our staff, but it's coming up pretty soon here next week with them.
Okay. Thanks, council member. Thanks, Melanie. So let's look at what's been decided or what's in the plan that is potentially moving forward, and take a look at it, unpack it a little bit, and understand a little more about what's still being shaped.
Okay, and I will try to share my screen. We pulled together some images. Okay,
you should be able to do that now.
Yeah, so let me go to share the screen. And please, both Lori and Tiffany, add your comments as we go through this. Can everyone see? I have a really large screen, so it looks big to me. How does it look for everyone else?
It looks good.
Okay. So LHB has provided us with this color rendering of, or not a rendering, I'm sorry, but of the master plan. Because I know some of the conversations that we've heard is that the master plan, you can't see the green, and that makes sense. And so we've been pretty vocal about that's the blueprint that tells us what goes where. And so Tiffany, if you have any background about the colors behind this, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, it's now that the Planning Commission has requested the removal of the T2 zoning and an adjustment of a couple of the blocks to be either T1 or T3, we really have 3 land use types left that will be developed with buildings on it. So the yellow ones are low density residential opportunities that can include both rental and ownership opportunities. So envisioning everything from a single family home to a townplex to a duplex to a multiplex to small apartment buildings. The red ones are all higher density residential that especially as the nearer you get to Larpenteur, have the opportunity for first floor retail or commercial uses. And those buildings are envisioned to be approximately 5 or 6 stories tall. And then the purple ones are the light industrial buildings. So that's where we have this tax base we're trying to retain and then draw into St. Paul. So employers who are going to be creating jobs, this will not be like an automated factory. They will all be buildings that have people working inside of them per the workforce agreements from the Port Authority. And then everything else is either green or blue. So we have the dark blue are the wetlands. 3 of them are existing wetlands and they will remain in their current location. And then 2 of them are relocated wetlands in order to make sure that everything gets cleaned up and all the mercury contamination is removed. The light blue are additional stormwater treatment and capture facilities. The brighter green is the city park, and then the light colored green is just the remainder of the open space network throughout the site. So ultimately there will be 20 acres of green space that is well connected by a pedestrian and bike trail system.
Yeah. And so, and I would mention as well, so in the last year, we have been doing simultaneously community engagement as well. And we have had a great partnership with both Councilmember Yang and Councilmember Prince and helping us spread the message and being involved. And that's included surveys, that's included focus groups. Now we're going in a little bit deeper with our work, with work groups that are focused on specific topics. And we're just getting out of the urban design conversations and we're moving out of the sustainability conversations. We're moving into conversations about housing. And when we say we're moving into about housing, it's really understanding, and Tiffany, you can probably explain this a little bit more, but what is that mix? What would the units look like? Because yes, we see boxes, and yes, we know that there's a certain level of density, but there's still community conversations that can happen that can influence. We keep saying it's how do you bring this to life? Because yes, this is 2-dimensional, but there's still community input that will help us bring it to life. So
yes. The urban design work group has been talking about how the new development would look and feel as you walk by. You're walking your dog, you're taking your kids to the park. What are you looking at as you walk by? And one of the clear messages that we're receiving from these community members is that we don't want to see the same building 20 times in a row. We don't want to see 20 identical townhouses walking down the street. So when you look at those yellow zones in the low density residential, they're only little rectangles for the time being, but all of those rectangles are different building types. So there's a lot of variety and mixture in there. So one of the things that they've been considering is requiring that you can't have more than 2 of the same kind of building in a row. So rather than seeing 20 townhomes all lined up, you have to max it out at a certain point, and then you have to see something a little bit different. The housing group will be talking about a slightly different mix of what kind of units are these going to be. So when we look at the red ones, do we want to see a building that's 100% made out of studio apartments? Probably not, because that's only serving a very narrow demographic. We have people who need to have their entire families living with them. So we really need 3, 4, 5 bedroom apartment opportunities. We need multi-generational housing opportunities throughout the site. We need live work opportunities, and we need senior housing opportunities as well. So there are a lot of different housing choices that need to be discussed by the housing work group.
yeah, so we're pulling that housing work group together. And so we've had some conversations with different people in the city. So we're working in tandem, making sure everyone knows what we're doing. Next week, we're actually going to be reviewing the applications, and we're also going to be inviting someone from ideally PED to be part of those conversations. We're also going to reach out to housing developers, not to necessarily be on the committee, but to be guests in the conversations. And so a lot of that is being pulled together. What I will say is that we put out a pretty aggressive marketing campaign to get people to apply for this committee. And so we have 10 spots and we have 66 applications that we're going through. So we have had a positive response from within the neighborhood. we are going through a process of prioritizing to the point where prioritizing based on homeowners and renters, because we want to make sure that we're hearing voices on both sides, representing the diversity of the neighborhood, and then zeroing in and looking at where people are living. And we're putting a priority, again, because we have 66 people that we're looking at, is then zeroing in on those people that live the closest to the site. And so we kind of have this benchmark of, are you a mile from 2200 Larpenteur? So I don't know if anyone has any questions on this before we move to the next slide. I know it's supposed to be a casual conversation, so I feel like I'm doing a presentation. So I'll open that up. Oh,
And Andrea, I'm
Prince
gonna
has your hand up.
Oh, there you go. Councilmember Prince.
Oh, I think
Oh,
you're
you're
on.
on mute.
My question, and maybe this is coming up later in the conversation, but one of my big concerns here is that we know that the Port Authority doesn't do housing, and that is clear. That's clear. So I'm assuming that we are planning to put out an RFP or something for a master developer of the housing portion of the site, or will PED serve in the role of master developer of the housing?
That is a great question. Thank you for bringing it up. So there are 3 possible scenarios that could be pursued. One of which is the Port Authority remains the master developer for all of the housing. And you're absolutely right. The Port Authority has not done housing development in the past, but we at LHB have decades of experience and we are here to help. So everything that you're seeing here, they look like rectangles. There's actually a really, really detailed concept and spreadsheets behind everything to make sure that what we're showing here is 1,000 units. What we're showing here is a wide array of housing typologies and options. And what we're showing here also includes the capacity to build affordable housing options. So we are here to help. Option 2 is that all of the housing gets sold to the city of St. Paul, all of those blocks, and the city of St. Paul starts to manage the housing development from there. And then option 3 is a third party could be interested in taking over the master development of the housing options. So it kind of just depends on how financing is agreed upon moving forward.
And if I could just add to that, I appreciate that LHB has lots of experience there, but I think not only the Port Authority doesn't do housing, but the Port Authority historically tried to do housing in the 80s. It did housing, at Energy Park. And I think if there's a reason that the Port Authority no longer does housing, that it's because that just was not a good fit. So I say that with complete respect for the Port Authority and what it does, and that what the Port Authority does, it does very, very well. And I just need us to all take a hard look at this as the community, because we do want, the Highland Bridge site has Ryan Companies as its master developer for the entire site. And Ryan Companies is a local developer that does very good work and has really been great for PED to work with in terms of building out that site for all types of housing, and including deeply affordable and supportive housing, senior housing at the Highland Bridge site. So I just, as an East Side City Council person who I will admit that I have been less active on a day-to-day basis in the planning for this, and I completely respect that Council Member Yang leading this process on behalf of the council. I just want to make sure that we as East Siders are taking a hard look at the Highland Bridge site and asking that we be treated in that same way by the city in terms of the importance of the development of this project. You know, we have 120 some acres, whatever the exact number is, which is very similar to the size of the Highland Bridge sites. We're in opposite corners of the city. And I think, you know, East Siders tend to be kind of quiet and kind of accept the hand they're dealt, but we need to ensure and fight for really high quality development here that is very well done. So I'll just make that statement because it's just super important to me.
Absolutely. And I think we can echo that that's the important part of the community engagement is that, you know, we want to make sure that anything that we do and LHB is going to stand behind that as well, that it does have to be something of quality and really listening to the neighborhood. And I would say that what we're hearing a lot of now, I mean, it seems like everything is a compromise to a certain degree, and there's no two people that see exactly the same thing, but we have heard over and over about the importance of the affordable housing, and we have affordable housing developers who are reaching out to us.
Mhm.
And so some of those conversations, there isn't a master plan in place, and so obviously once that's in place, we can be having some more of those conversations. But I think that's a really good point and really something that we're already looking at and trying to determine what is best for this site.
Thank you, Andrea. And if I could just follow up, Paris, I'm sorry to cut ahead of the other hands that are raised. And Andrea, I want to be clear that we would not have this site now if the Port Authority hadn't stepped forward and said, the city needs to do significant development here. And we are gonna lead the way, because we could very well have lost that development opportunity if the site had been parceled out to private developers. So I really support the port and the hard work that they're doing. And I think the point that I'm trying to make is that we as the city need to play a really strong role here. And we do housing development. We know how to do housing development. We're helping it get done at Highland Bridge. And so what I'm talking about more here is what is the city's role. So I just want to be clear about that. It's not in any way a criticism of the port.
No, absolutely. And we agree. Thank you. So a couple other hands. I don't know.
Yep. Sorry, Andrea, I'll manage those if you want. Let's go Ann DeJoy, Ruben, Moore, and then there was a question in the chat.
I just want to follow up on what Jane had said. I think it makes perfect sense for a housing developer to develop the housing. Having said, and Ryan Companies is a good example and a very good company. But I don't want us to forget that there's a movement right now on emerging developers and developers of color. And there are many programs that are stepping up to the plate to provide resources and training. And this is a great opportunity in the best neighborhood, a very diverse neighborhood that already has existing affordable housing. I live a couple blocks away from the site and I'm really excited about this. So I think, while I agree, a Ryan company would be great. I really, if there's some kind of agreement with a master housing developer to bring in emerging developers, specifically developers of color. There's a lot of good projects. We've seen a couple recently, JB Vang for one, and I could call out other ones. So that's my vision and hope for the site. That's
Thanks,
all I'll
Ann.
say.
Thank you. And Ann's transitioning into the next question that I've got for us, but let's hear from Ruben for a minute. Ruben?
You know, really quickly, and Jane, and I think, Ann, you really nailed it. The Port Authority is already doing these creative style developments right up the street on the east side, right at the arcade corridor at the O3M site. I've worked with the Port Authority, a small startup community developer and sole community development corporation. And we partnered with PPL, a not-for-profit developer, to bring affordable housing, multi-generational affordable housing and a commercial mix right on the east side. And we can't wait to announce that project. It's a significant one. And so that's happening. And I do think there's a role for small developers to even sit at the master developer seat, right? Because there's new capability partnerships you could bridge with mentor developers. And this is an opportunity for us to lean in on inclusion, also lean in the East Side way. And because it's about East Side, it's about creating jobs in the East Side. It's about creating an inclusive environment, inclusive construction project that brings together all folks from the various economic statuses and various backgrounds to this project. So I'm excited to continue to coordinate. I'd love to meet with some of the city folks and bring the port and other folks together to think creatively about this.
Thanks, Ruben.
And Ruben, I would say as well, as we're pulling together the housing work group, and those meetings are going to take place over the summer, starting in June, and we are inviting different developers and also including affordable housing developers. And so all scales, large and small. And so if you could, let's go to the chat, let me put in my email address. I can send you some information if you're interested in being a guest at one or multiple meetings.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. Ruben put it in his too. This is what I do. It's kind of like, it's kind of like The Bachelor. It's not really. It's kind of like master connecting. This is how it goes. It's great. Jan had a question about this particular slide, and then I'd like to, before we run other slides, just ask the broader question that I had about next steps. But Jan says, why is light industrial okay now when it's considered inappropriate to be next to residential housing in the 2040 comp plan and city zoning? Talk about how we came to that.
I think that the difference is that this is a transitional zoning designation or a transitional industrial zoning designation rather than a heavy industrial zoning designation. So the transitional industrial use is very restricted to things that do not create any kind of notable pollution, that do not create major noise issues, that do not create eyesores. So it's people who are creating added value things like electronics, people who are making circuit boards, people who are making jam, people who are making things and then selling them to a final consumer rather than like raw material refinement and things that need to happen on a larger scale and produce a lot of unwelcome byproducts in a residential context. So you're absolutely right that a heavy industrial use would be inappropriate to be placed immediately next to residential, but actually a transitional industrial use is a really, really excellent way to create a thriving neighborhood that can function without as much car usage, because there's an opportunity here for people to live across the street from their jobs. A job that they didn't have to go to 4 to 10 years of schooling in order to get a living wage at.
Yeah, and I guess too, if we're probably not going to have time to get into this today, but check out our website, check out our video. I mean, we're looking at trying to make this a carbon-free community. And so we're not bringing anything here that's going to jeopardize that status.
Nice. So that actually is a good segue to this. Did it get in the chat? I just tried to do that and maybe I deleted it. No, it just didn't happen.
Oh, the maker and text space.
Yeah, talk about that.
I would say, so these are the buildings for light industrial, and it's in the comp plan. So I could be speaking out of turn, but we did a market study and it really pointed to the need for the light industrial in the city. There's not a lot of opportunities. It's a 5-minute to get to a freeway or highway within 5 minutes. And because of the tax dollars that we have that we'll be bringing to the space, those are all positives. It's not to say that there won't be any maker or tech space. It's just in this particular spot, this is the fit that has been deemed for the best use of this piece of land. So I'm not sure how else we can talk about that unless Lori or Tiffany, you have anything to add.
I would add that in general, those maker spaces and entrepreneurial spaces, they, as the nature of a small business and something that's just getting started, they really need to pursue facilities that have incredibly affordable rents, and that is usually not a new construction. So maker space is awesome, entrepreneurial spaces are awesome, but they really need to be in existing buildings that are being refurbished for that use. A new construction needs to be supported by a business that's established enough to be able to either buy it outright or pay a very stable rent on a monthly basis.
And I'm wondering if before we get into, I see, Paris, that you have your next question is to share, because again, this is the blueprint. And even though we don't have a final master plan in place, the closer that we get, the more LHB is going in and giving the visualization of what this can be. And that's really come from a lot of the community conversations. So people want to see the renderings. They want to see what it looks like when it comes to life, because this is really hard to see yourself wanting to work here, wanting to live here. And so Tiffany's team has taken this to show what it could be. So for example, yes, we're looking at medium to high density housing, but we're also making sure that there's the green space and open spaces for people to recreate, the stormwater management systems. There's so many other things that they're having conversations about. And I'll go through these pictures, and then maybe Tiffany, if you want to go into a little bit more detail, but we want to make sure that there's spaces for people to go for a walk, to take their bikes, to go for a jog. And we're going to go a little bit into more detail. Our final slides are talking about that light industry, because we have heard over and over, nobody wants this to be Beacon Bluff. And we hear that, and we don't want this to be Beacon Bluff. Well, that's a success story in so many ways. We understand the need for something different in this neighborhood, and we respect that. So there's been a lot of time put into those conversations. Taking a look. So here's the high density opportunities that would be on McKnight and Larpenter. But if you look beyond, you'll see there's access to that park that right now, unless you were paying to golf, well, right now you don't have access to it. So there's things that are new. If you look at the stormwater system, not the stormwater, the wetlands behind, it's taking a look and saying, how can we activate that space? Because when we talked to the community and we were doing the service on the focus groups and the surveys, really what came out of that is the two main things that the people we talked to, and we talked to about 600 people that lived in that area, was that they wanted better access to trails and they wanted access to water features. And so that is top of mind. And one of the things that we're really focusing on, and when I say we, LHB is taking the information that the community has provided and they're incorporating that into drawings like this. Now, this is just a rendering. This is not what it's going to look like. This is what it can look like. And this is the quality that we're looking for with whoever does the development of the housing. And so here's taking the wetland. Here's an opportunity to create spaces where families can go out and they can enjoy that space. We've heard from a lot of people. I mean, we really asked Tiffany, like, can you put in a dog park? Because we've heard over and over, people want to see a dog park and community gardens. If you see that's along the sidewalk, we've heard that over and over. So we're very aware that if there's a way to create community gardens, that'll be a win for the neighborhood because we've heard it multiple times. So just to illustrate about the idea, and this is something that LHB came up with, is the idea that here is a building on top. And this is what we would call a really nice building that actually exists is this in Beacon Bluff?
This is the Midway building that the Port Authority developed. And what you're looking at on the top is a very expensive building to build. And it is like on the absolute cutting edge of, let's call it, beautiful architecture for this light industrial use. And the proposal for the Heights is to take these buildings that we've been trying to push them toward a more aesthetically pleasing configuration for the last 3 decades, but how can we make them even better? So we know that we can't spend infinite amounts of money making them better. So the concept is to make them simpler and then to add artwork to them. So I don't know if you put in every single evolution of the Midway building, but the bottom one is like, what if we took the exact same building and just made it the plainest of plain boxes we can think of? And then on the next slide, Andrea, we're starting to add articulation by way of photovoltaic panels. So to make the facade more interesting, but at the same time, we're also creating energy. And then adding another component of this mural-based artwork. So instead of the building facade kind of popping out 4 feet and then popping back in with that sort of articulation, we're articulating it with energy producing solar panels and beautiful pieces of art instead. And then on the next slide, when we start evolving the concept even more, let's add a layered landscape approach. So by the time you're looking at the bottom slide, what are you really looking at in this on this site? The last thing you're paying attention to is the building itself. You're paying attention to the sculptural artworks that we would like to see right up next to the sidewalk. You're paying attention to the beautiful vegetation and then the ornamented murals on all of the buildings.
Yeah, and so these are the things that you can't see on the blueprint, and they're not part of the master plan, but it's part of the conversation we're having with the community and how can we work together to create something better. And this is completely came from those conversations. And then, and I just want to lastly point out, so even the artwork, now these are just examples. We're not going to dictate what the artwork is. LHB is not going to dictate what the artwork is. We're going to be bringing in local artists and community members to do what feels right in this space and in this community. And so here are some examples of what it could be, but these are things that are in other communities. We don't know what St. Paul, what the Heights will be, but we're excited to see how those conversations go. So whether it's the murals and then these different art opportunities, that's where we're at.
Nice, thanks, Andrea. So I had 2 more questions for us to kind of work at, and then we'll get our conversation going as well. And Councilmember Prince pushed us in one of those directions, but this partly you've answered, Andrea and Tiffany, what positive contributions have come out of the public process so far that have improved the project, really pushed us into this different kind of space thinking about this. What I want to ask here is, how can we make this plan the best that it can be? What are some ideas from this group that we think could help East Siders that we should really push for? And Councilmember Prince mentioned one aspect of that. How do we make sure that we are asking for the kinds of resources and support for designing it that it really needs? And I think that's, the question of how do we do that, I think is still open. Let's hear about some of the other things we'd really like to see. So some other things that would really make this thing sing in the best way possible. Green space, so that was one of the things that you mentioned, and access to that, but not only access to that, kind of a structure that designs, or a building structure, a building plan that designs opportunities for people to really enjoy those spaces. What are some other things that people are really feeling are needed at this space that we should advocate for and try to push for? Shatika is jumping off the call. I just looked down to see the chat. Some folks are responding to that. That's good. Deeply affordable housing is one of those things that I think is a part of the mix that the Planning Commission really asked for. Is there anyone on the call who wants to kind of just reiterate that or speak to that in this particular space? It looks like we've got a good mix of what that could look like. Nobody wants to talk about housing at the moment.
I can say that deeply affordable housing is something that's been a recurring piece of the conversation for the last 2 years, and something that we were just talking about yesterday on how to make sure that we are helping to facilitate its presence on the site. So one of the things that we've been looking at is trying to have as few surface parking spots as possible on the site, because it's not a great use of space to just have a surface-based parking lot. But the thing with affordable housing is that it's actually very, very difficult and potentially cost prohibitive to build if you have to include a structured parking component. So there's a discussion that needs to happen with the city of St. Paul and how we can increase the density of an affordable housing development a little bit and not have to put in quite as much parking, because a lot of people who end up living in a deeply affordable housing situation don't have a car, so they don't need a parking space. So they wouldn't need to have the same size of a surface parking lot as a different kind of building would. And so we can get the units that we need, we can keep the surface parking as small as possible, and we don't need to put an onerous demand of structured parking on an affordable housing developer.
I see Councilmember Prince wants to chime in. Go ahead.
Thank you, Paris and everybody. I think on the deeply affordable side of things, that, as you know, the city has announced that we have put 37.5 million into deeply affordable housing, with the goal of being able to hit that 30% AMI, which is the kind of the sweet spot. And so I am presuming that those funds would be available for projects that went in at Hillcrest, kind of regardless of who the master developer is. And if we have to clarify that, you know, we can sure do that. And the other thing is how much it meant to me that former Mayor Chris Coleman spoke at the Planning Commission about the opportunity for Habitat to be there, for being able to build ownership options to create generational wealth for our St. Paul, you know, for families, but, you know, serving our east side. And I think Chris also felt, Mayor Coleman, that that there was room for more housing than maybe we have even thought about. So in any event, I think that's a really important discussion, but I know those of us at the city feel that deeply affordable has to happen, and we need it there very much so. When the Highland Bridge project master plan was done, we, the council at that time, called for a requirement that at least 10% of the units to be built at the Highland Bridge be deeply affordable. And that goal has continued into the, as the project is developed, that is being honored as it moves forward.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Prince. Let's hear from Ben.
So I know we're talking about housing, but I think that, you know, housing and job creation go hand in hand. So here's what I have to say about this. It is really important that a majority of the units in this development be deeply affordable housing, because you can't be serious about fighting poverty unless you pay a living wage and you have housing people can afford. So I'm 25, I make $27 an hour, I have a daughter, and I live in a market rate unit. And when I pay my taxes, I don't really have very much money left that I can save at the end of the year. I just paid my taxes, and it was like a significant chunk of my savings were gone because I paid my taxes. So if you're not paying at least $25 an hour in these jobs, and if the people in the neighborhood are not having some level of deeply subsidized housing, they will never escape the cycle of poverty, because I'm someone who has a lot of education. I have a lot of privileges based on my race and my gender, and I'm making $27 an hour, and I still can't save money every year very easily. And I don't have a car payment, and I don't have a health insurance payment because I'm still underneath that 26-year-old cap. But you know, it's like if people don't make enough money, if you're not making $25 an hour and you can't afford your housing, you can't pay a market rate unit, like you will never break the cycle of poverty. So the jobs have to pay at least $25 an hour, and the housing has to be cheap enough that people can build wealth for themselves, because otherwise they're just going to stay in the cycle of poverty again and again and again, and it's not going to be a transformational project. So it's really important that a significant percentage of this housing is deeply affordable. Even 80% AMI is still really expensive. You know, I'm cost burdened and I'm making $27 an hour. So it's like, that needs to happen at this site. Otherwise, it's just going to perpetuate the inequities on the east side.
I think that's a really good point. And I would say that's going to be a big part of the conversation for the housing group. And I think we agree that the whole goal is how can you find wealth building opportunities? So I think that's a good point. And I thank you for that. I think we agree.
Yes. All right. So as we're getting ready to, sorry, we're just about to run out of time. This has been a good conversation, and clearly there is more that is needed. The question that I wanted us to end with is maybe the one that we want to go out into the conversation that needs to happen between now and May 25th. And it is, what changes could the city get more involved with that would help the east side really maximize this possibility? The vision that we see here that has jobs and other components. Jan also made a comment too. The property is perfect for housing, trees, wetlands, native species, all become an asset. If we're going to include jobs in that mix, how do we get more housing on the site? One of the things that came up was, can we go with housing on top of some of those industrial buildings? Is that ever done? Would we consider even doing that with one building as a pilot?
And I think we were ready for that question, because I think the answer is that's probably not going to work. And while it's a great concept, I'm going to turn that over to Tiffany, because there are some real restrictions that make that a challenge.
Thank you. And it is a fantastic idea, and it works in places that have extremely high real estate values like Brooklyn, where it's like there is such an overpowering demand for housing in that spot that you're able to make it work. In an area like Hillcrest, there isn't the same market pressure to build up in the same way. It is easier for a developer to say, I'm just going to go do my thing in Eagan instead. So we want to make sure that developers are willing to take the risk and to make the investment in this neighborhood, not in Eagan. Yeah. So to require it would be very infeasible. To be like cool with it, if somebody brings it to the table and says, hey, I want to do this, are you guys interested? I don't think anybody at the port is going to say, no, we're not interested. Like, let's talk about it. Let's see if we can make it work and everything. If a developer wants to bring it to the table, then it's a valuable conversation to have.
So maybe that question brings us back to how we get that next phase shaped in such a way as that master developer or the developers of color, the emerging developers that Ann mentioned, are a part of the mix to have that conversation about how we develop this and how it goes forward. Definitely good questions going forward. We're just about out of time. Jan asks how long it will take to clear the land, and Councilmember Yang also wants to chime in. Think about whether we can answer that question about clearing the land, and Councilmember Yang, go ahead.
Just in brief, clearing the land is going to take about 8 to 12 months. So there is an extensive amount of mercury contamination that needs to be cleared out and either taken off site or stockpiled and then treated on site. So the contamination removal and then mass grading process will take approximately a year.
Thanks for that, Councilmember Yang. Maybe the last word.
Thanks. I just wanted to say that I feel it's going to be so important for everyone to weigh in on the public hearing as we get closer to June. So I'd love to hear from all of you. I know that the other council members would as well. So Paris, I'll send you information about how people can send an input for that. And also, as I'm listening to everyone talk, like something that's always been simmering in mind for me is, for me, like deeply affordable housing is a huge, huge priority for the Heights. I am thinking about how we can put ourselves in the best position to make sure that our city and community's priorities for housing are basically at the forefront of all of this. How do we make sure that we continue being decision makers for this entire process? And Tiffany or Andrea, you mentioned like the 3 possible options of how we can decide on who's going to be developing housing. And so this is something that I'm currently thinking about and going to be talking to staff about. So I'd love to continue talking with you all about that, because we know that when it's us who are the decision makers, we have the most say in deciding how a development is done. And so as a city, as a community, I feel it's going to be so important for us to really work hand in hand on that and figure out how we can make our visions come to life, and also be the folks who are basically setting the agenda for the Heights, because this is our community, this is our home.
Thanks, Councilmember. Thank you, everybody, for participating today. Andrea put a quick update in the chat, and I dropped in some final announcements. Just an update on the May 1st Mother's Day I Heart Mom event that had 250 registrants who attended and over 30 community partners, and was a fantastic success. Thanks to everyone who helped participate in that. She also listed her contact information there if we want to get back in touch to connect about that, or folks want to learn more. I will send slides to folks who are on the call. We've got a couple of other messages that are popping into the chat here as we figure it out. Claire's making an announcement. All right, fantastic. Claire, do you just want to pop on and talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, definitely. ESNDC is sponsoring the first of hopefully many, but definitely quarterly Eastside Black Business networking events. So that will be next Thursday. So that's the 11th of May from 6 to 8:30 at Storehouse Grocers. Pastor Carl has a new location on East 7th Street that is beautiful. So we're really excited to be in that space. So if you're able to help spread the word to Black small business owners, aspiring entrepreneurs, community stakeholders, that would be so wonderful. We're really to kick that off and have some great community dialogue next week. And I dropped the link in the chat for the flyers.
Thanks, Claire. If you'd also pop it on ISABA's website, that'd be great. And I'll pick it up and put it in the place to do that is under G in the announcement that I just sent out to. Visit St. Paul also has a spring events blog that Chelsea forgot to mention that she wanted me to extend to you all. And then we have 3 other things I just want to mention to you. One is the AAPI Asian American Pacific Islander Small Business EXPO, May 14th. This is our meet in person ISABA networking event. It's a Saturday. It's going to be at Metro State, and it's going to be a blast. Please check it out and see if it's something that you would come to, connect with other ISABA members, connect with members of our community. There are going to be 80 exhibitors at the event, and we hope to see just a pile of humanity, including all of your bright, lovely, shining faces, too, in our real human bodies. So it gets fun to network in person for sure. And then ISABA is also working on relaunching some other caucuses, a Latinx Spanish-speaking business meeting that's going to happen on May 26th, and an Asian American business meeting on Arcade on May 25th, the same night that a lot of you will have to figure out, like, which should I go to? Should I go to the city council meeting and talk about the Heights, or should I go to this other? I mean, that's part of what's fun, is giving you choices. So thank you for tuning in today, everybody. This last question, how do we maximize what the city could do to help support getting these things done, including the zero carbon goals, the housing goals, the participation and community benefit for the neighborhood? These are all things that we could be talking to our city council members about, and should, for things that we care about on the east side that we really want to see happen. And not only in this development, but in other developments that we're putting forward. So just want to say thank you, everybody. Enjoy your Thursday, and we'll be signing off.
Thank you.
Thank you, St. Paul Port Authority and all of our guests from the city.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.